what do you expect to see over the next 5-10 years as far as the money printing game goes? Do you think we're going into another acute crisis and then we'll have another big QE? Or?
Yeah, I don't want to get too dark. And some people have read The Mandibles. I'm sure you have. And
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with the thesis.
The thesis, yeah. I mean, I hope we don't go there. Look, I'm very comfortable saying I think that we have a lot of inflation in the future, and people are going to have to learn to live with that and need to protect themselves from it. How bad? That's debatable. The book talks about kind of probability weightings on all the possible outcomes with respect to inflation. The crime, I think you're right. I mean, I think for the upper 10% of the country, they don't even notice what's going on. They're generally fiat based and doing pretty well. Yeah. I think for the bottom half of the country, everybody is really badly hurting, and even in the middle section, people are pretty badly hurting, and that's sad. I don't interact. I live in a pretty nice area. I don't interact with these people on a daily basis. I have a sister who lives in a rural area that's very middle class, and she tells me the stories, and I'm just horrified by how tough it is for a lot of these people. So where's it going to go? I don't really know. I mean, the best case, I think, is that we would do a monetary reset of some type, and we would go back to sound money. I mean, if you want to kind of cut to the chase of the quick and correct solution, money being broken has happened in history many, many times over hundreds of years, over thousands of years. And when it happens, what happens if a society then decides we are going to go back to money that is not broken, we're going to return to sound money, things will self-organize and get better, much better, quickly. Yeah. Really quickly, actually. Yeah. But that choice has to be made. You can't wish that it's going to happen without making that choice. I mean, you're either on a sound money standard or you're printing and on a fiat standard. And the outcomes under the two are substantially different.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a little bit disheartening because we tend to only change when the pain
that's exactly right.
becomes so acute.
Isn't that right? And that's the sad part. I mean, how bad do we have to let this get before we finally have a political crisis and change it? Which is why, by the way, I'm going to send the book to, I'm going to go with Dennis Porter. We're going to march around. We're going to get it to every politician. I'm going to send it to Trump. I'm going to send it to Vance. I'm going to send it to Bessent. Yeah. I mean, look, if we want to get the change before we get to all the pain, what you got to do is buy this book, give it to your neighbors. I mean, we got to turn this thing, and I know this is immodest on my part, but we got to turn this thing into common sense, which Thomas Paine wrote, which basically helped, galvanize the nation over breaking with Britain. Yes. And we've got to get a groundswell of hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of Americans saying, we got to have sound money. Yes. Lepard's book shows you why and proves it.
Yes. Yeah. So you're channeling some Paul Revere energy here, right?
A little bit. I mean, look,
the printing is coming.
To compare me to all those guys is a joke because I'm just like a squirrel looking for a nut. But my point is, I do feel strongly about this thesis. I mean, of course. There's plenty of fight in me for this thesis. Whether we can get this out of the small little Bitcoin community into a nationwide movement, who the hell knows?
Yeah, and so it is an uphill battle, right? God, because we have the Keynesian economic paradigm that's been ideologically inserted in all the universities across the world.
Right.
Makes this a blind spot for everyone.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like you can't even get this type of education in any mainstream channel.
Again, why I wrote the book, and there's a part in the chapter on the history of economics where I talk about how the Fed has basically bought the economics profession.
Yes,
I mean it's a protection racket. They pay all the monetary scholars to not criticize fiat.
Yes,
if you're an Austrian economist, you can't get a PhD level degree and get a seat as a professor, right? Because you're going against the narrative.
Exactly.
I mean, it's so bad. It's so broken. It's so corrupt. It's interesting though. I want to go back to the point you mentioned earlier, the crime thing. There's a part of the book that talks about this. I mean, inflation breaks societies. Inflation ruins societies. And I go through in a detailed way what happened in World War I. So the big inflations in the United States, there was one in 1812, that war, not that big. Civil War was big, really big. Greenbacks, a lot of inflation there, but calm down. We got back on the gold standard in the 1870s. The World War I was a seminal event. Okay, the Fed had just been formed in 1913. War broke out in 1916.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
We printed a ton of money to pay for the war. No surprise, right? And the Fed broke its charter like from day one. No surprise. But the price level basically doubled. You know, from 1916 to 1921, the price level doubled, up 100%. That tore up the society. You know, Ku Klux Klan, all kinds of race riots, all kinds of labor strife and strikes and shutdowns. Okay. Charles Ponzi was 1919, Ponzi scheme, kind of mirrors SBF today, right? Chicago Black Sox, 1919, you know, betting, cheating scandal. I mean, and you know, you can just kind of see how, you know, societies get ruined through bad inflation. And the interesting outcome of all that, of course, is the progressives at the time thought, well, this was all caused by alcohol.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, not that it was, they didn't realize it was the broken money that was causing all these problems. They thought it was alcohol that was causing the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, let's pass the Volstead Act and go dry and we'll solve it. Which, you know, I mean, look, I don't drink, so I'm not opposed to the Volstead Act per se, but the point is, there was a lot of strife as a result of that. Right?
Yeah. Why is, well, so that's so interesting. Why is this such a blind spot for people? It's like, it seems to be so obvious in a way that it's the thing that we use all the time. And if, you know, printing money has this intuitive sense of it's not doing anything good, it's just stealing from you. Why do you think people are so hesitant or reticent to look at the money as the source of the problem? They look to other things like alcohol.
You know, it's a great question. I mean, I think that, you know, they get misinformation. And by the way, another optimistic and hopeful part of the book, in the latter book, is how the internet is helping to change all this. I mean, you know, if you've got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, you know, and the politicians saying, well, yeah, this inflation is all caused by greedy corporations.
Of course.
You know, you listen to that, you believe it.
It's social engineering.
Yeah. And you don't think, no, this inflation is caused by the Federal Reserve and what they've done. That's really the cause. So, I mean, you know, you've got gaslighting and lying coming from all the people who sit in the system and benefit from the system as it now exists. Now, the good news, again, on that topic, the bright news about that is that's getting blown up too, right?
Yeah.
You're doing this. Rogan's doing his thing. Tucker's doing his thing. You know, we've got alternative news sources.
Decentralized media.
Yeah. We're all starting. I mean, you know, all this, I mean, the book talks about this and takes you through kind of a historical tour of how we got centralized. And that was a good thing in general in the beginning, because centralization led to scale and scale led to cheap stuff. You know, I mean, Henry Ford, you know, started the assembly line and it was great. I mean, you know, we got all these good cars cheap, you know, but 1946 was peak centralization. We figured out how to slaughter 50 million people really efficiently, you know, with gas chambers and bombs and all kinds of shit, right? And since then, I think at that point in time, what I think happened is we found out there were diseconomies of large scale. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can build a big scale industrial economy, but guess what? If Hitler becomes your leader and decides he wants to take over Europe, you know, you're going to see a lot of innocent people get killed.
Yes.
So having that scale economy is dangerous.
Yeah. And he rose from the ashes of the Weimar hyperinflation.
Exactly. Yeah. Another perfect example of how inflation creates perverse outcomes.
Yeah.
Right?
So how do you, like, because this, it's again one of these things that's very obvious to Bitcoiners or monetary historians. It's a tenuous connection for people that are outside of this space. How how do you approach it? Like, if you're talking to someone, obviously the book is a great approach, but if you can't get them to read the book, how do you elevator pitch people on this connection between money and everything else?
Great question. So my elevator pitch is, hey, you know, you're hurting from inflation, right? There's nobody in this country that will argue with that today. Anyone who goes to a supermarket, unless you don't buy your own food, you know you're hurting from inflation. It's just stunning how bad it is, right? I say, you're hurting from inflation, right? Yep, got it. Okay. Do you really understand the underlying cause and how we got there and why that doesn't, you know, and that's the other thing. I wrote the book because a lot of people think this is normal. Oh yeah, we're hurting from inflation. But you know what? We've always hurt from inflation. It's no, you know, this is just the way of the world. You can't change it, right? And that's where I say, no, stop. You can change it. It does not have to be this way. There was a long period of time in America when it was not this way. And it's gotten this way. And not only has it gotten this way, but it's gotten this way and it's gotten worse. And so if we return to sound money, we can solve it. And, you know, that's why we need to, you know, even though, you know, monetary stuff may not, you know, dear average citizen, monetary stuff may not be on the top of your mind. But you should learn to think more about it because it's actually a very important issue. Yeah,
and so for sound money in the elevator pitch, you're just telling people this is the thing that doesn't make prices go up.
Exactly.
As much.
That's the elevator pitch. We can stop inflation. It does not have to exist. And then if you want to get a little more into the graduate level, I go into the Jeff Booth thesis, right? In fact, You know, your TV costs haven't gone up, right? No, this is great. You know, I got a big screen now for $300.
Yep.
Right. That could be happening in everything.
Yes.
You know, and so that's the dream, but we don't have that because the system doesn't allow us to have that because of the way it's set up. And then I start to go into the politics, and this is where the book differs from Lynn. Lynn came at it from an engineering perspective. It's brilliant, right? I come at it a little bit more from a political perspective, right? You know, look, I mean, Nixon had a choice. Everyone says, well, he had to go off the gold. No, he didn't. No, he could have just said, we're going to revalue gold higher. Now, he would have had domestic inflation, but he could have let gold float. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? And he chose not to. Yeah. And so the politics of the matter is, what's happened is the politicians and the big business people, the quintillionaires, the people who know how to make inflation work for them. I mean, the other thing in the book, the other chart in the book that I think is very important is the wealth distribution chart in the early going. I mean,
you know what page that is?
Yeah, it's right up front. It's under America is Broken. So yeah, if you go to page 20, Robert, what you'll see, it shows the total net worth of the top 1%. So the top 1% now holds 92% of the wealth in this country.
This is page 20,
Page
right?
20, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Total net worth held by the top 1%.
Right.
So there's net worth. Oh, the bottom.
And look at the bottom 50%. It's barely gone up. Wow. Right? Yeah. Okay. The point. This chart here. Yeah. The point being that there are people in society, wealthy people, who actually don't suffer from inflation. Right. One, because they got a lot of money, they don't care about the cost of food.
Own a bunch of assets.
And two, they know how to game it. They know how to play the system.
Right.
I mean, as I point out, if you can borrow money at 1%, 0%, 2%, 3%, whatever, some low rate, and use it to buy assets that yield a much higher yield,
right,
you're getting ahead.
Yeah, you're a cantillionaire.
Right. But the rest of us, we don't have that benefit because we can't borrow that cheap. I mean, the average human being, the average citizen in the United States, is paying 20-something% for a credit card loan.
Yeah. And this is where things get murky again, because there's this general, what people like sort of blame rich people for all these problems. And like to some extent, I guess you could argue when they're gaming the system, like maybe some of that is proper, but the real problem is not that people are rich. It's that people are being robbed basically through the money, through taxation, through regulation, et cetera.
I have no problem with rich people. I think people who add value honestly and aren't taking advantage of the system, they should be, paid more, earn more, whatever.
Yeah.
But what's happened is it's gotten very, very lopsided.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to use the example of I grew up in Ann Arbor. My father was a shopkeeper. Our neighbor ran Ford Motor Company, right? And the guy did better than my father, but not 400 times better in terms of salary, 5 times better or something. He was running a multinational corporation that was building cars all over the world.
Right.
I mean, there was a middle class in the olden days. And that was another reason for writing the book, that, some of the younger people in the Bitcoin sphere, I don't think understand just how nice and how good it was in this country in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, it wasn't perfect. There was a Vietnam War. Yeah. There were all kinds of problems. Okay. Right. And we didn't have the technologies we have today. I mean, technologically, today is miles away from then. I mean, it's just so fabulous. I mean, I was in college and I couldn't make long distance phone calls because they were too expensive. Yeah. I had a budget of I could call my parents once a week for 5 minutes. Yeah. Because of the cost of a call. I mean, compare that to today, right?
Sure.
But in terms of kindness and a middle class and gentility, it was a better country.
Right.
And it saddens me that we don't have that today. It really saddens me.
The middle class really is the center of gravity for any society. And then this is a very, the word obvious is a little bit dangerous, I guess. It seems pretty clear to me that printing money is going to destroy the middle class, right? For the reasons you just laid out.
Right.
It's like the people that depend on dollars to hold their value the most, the poor and the middle class, are the ones getting scammed in the money printing, and all that wealth gets reallocated to the top.
Exactly.
So you're just widening the gap between rich and poor, and therefore making society less stable.
Exactly.
Why is that so? You can say it in a few words, but for somehow, I guess because we're up against all the Keynesian propaganda,
there's that.
You're just competing with.
Well, there's that, and there's just the general. Look, everyone feels anger about the unfairness of that. Mm-hmm. Some of us react and go, "Look, it's not capitalism per se; it's crony capitalism." Yeah. Others like AOC and Bernie and some of the other people on the left Or like, no, these people aren't paying taxes. It's unfair that they're as rich as they're. And fine, that's a piece of it, but that's not really the core piece. The core piece is the uneven playing field.
Right.
If the playing field were even, that wouldn't be as extreme as it is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, there'd be nothing to complain about, right? Again, it could, for me, comes back to private property, but again, that's another one of these abstract things that people don't really understand. It's like if you just respect private property, universalize it, and don't violate it, right? Because money printing is a violation of private property, taxation is a violation of private property, crime is a violation of private property. All of these things. If you don't do that, you get that level playing field.
Correct.
And then you're having people that can only become rich by serving one another. And that's a world, it's like, yeah, you want a lot of rich people. That means they've solved a lot of problems for other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I look at a guy like Hewlett or Packard or, people who've invented things and made the world a better place. I'm totally comfortable with them being rich.
Of course. Yeah, because they've made everyone's lives so much better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.